Hi everyone, my name is Brad Vinning, and on this mini-series of executive stories, I'm talking to executives and founders about how COVID-19 treated them and their businesses in 2020. And today I'm joined by Dr. Jane Thomason, the author of Block Changing the World and most recently CEO of FinTech Worldwide. But if you look at her CV, it is far and it is wide, and in that abbreviation is not enough to justify how well-rounded Dr. Jane Thomason is in the technological space. This is a ripper, if I do say so myself. Enjoy. Jane Thomason, what a delight to have you here. You know what, there's three things that you have in common with my father. I know that's an unusual thing to start an interview with, but those three things are you wear bright clothes, you love working with underdeveloped countries, and you're super passionate about what you do in that area. And the last one is you travel a lot, or you did travel a lot. So 2020 is probably something which saw at least one of those things have to sort of fall by the wayside. And I'm glad to say you're still wearing something that's incredibly bright here right now. So you haven't let me down in that respect. But I fear it's probably going to be the lack of travel in 2020 that may have been the biggest impact on your business and your life. Talk to me about it. What were you traveling? How were you traveling in 2019, for example? What's the reference point?
Oh, Brad, I was just going everywhere. I was barely ever in Australia. And if I was here, it was for maybe 3 days. And then I'd be off to New York and London and India and, any other country that you can name. And we had, in 2019, bought a FinTech Worldwide, which is a global events company. So we were building this up, we were running events in London and planning them for other countries. And we were actually in London in March 2020. And we ran probably the last blockchain week that was ever run before COVID shut everything down. And we knew that there was something wrong because numbers were down and companies stopped people coming and overseas travellers weren't coming. But the day it really sank in was we flew to Dublin just after our conference for a day to talk to the Irish government about doing a big sustainable event there. And on that day, they cancelled St. Patrick's Day. And I looked at my daughter and I said, we better get home now or we're not getting home. So I've been here since March last year and it's been really tough. So I think for the first few months, I just imagined someone was going to put a plane on and let me get on a plane and resume my previous life. And then I think for the next few months, I thought, okay, well, I just have to really keep up all my international connections digitally and keep all of that going because I'm going to resume that life. Now in 2021, when none of that's happened, I'm going, well, I think I have to make a life here in Brisbane and figure out how to do that.
Yeah, and how's that been? Like, what have you done to fill in those gaps? Like, I look at my father and he uses email contact incredibly and has not stopped doing what he's doing. Even though some of the work has even dried up, he still does it as a passion project. But he's had to sort of find new social avenues and different ways of communicating with his colleagues overseas. How have you filled the gaps that travel used to fill so much for you?
Well, I'm going to answer that in two ways because you can't fill the gap of the travel because that's a sort of all-encompassing life experience. You're on planes and you're in hotels and you're meeting people and that takes time and it's exciting and you have different food. But in terms of retaining those global connections, that was easy. A lot of it is in Zoom and WhatsApp and emails, and I've still been doing conferences. I've maintained really close relationships with what's going on in Indonesia and in India and in Kenya, where I'm working with the blockchain and artificial intelligence company. So I'm staying close to what's going on. And one of the things that I'm doing, which is really interesting to me, is tracking the impact on the pandemic on the acceleration of technology, particularly in developing countries, because it's created this window of opportunity for technology that I think would have taken a decade to achieve that sort of acceleration. So that's super interesting.
Yeah, and who would have thought that something like that would come out of it? So, because that was going to be one of my questions is, quite often you see, like before the pandemic, it wouldn't have been unfair to say that blockchain had some sort of hysteria about it. And then all of a sudden, when people start actually focusing on the health, that things like that might fall by the wayside, especially if they don't have a fundamental impact on people's lives. From what you've just said, that isn't the case, and blockchain and the improvements that it can bring to people's lives is real. And if anything, the pandemic really has shown that technology can improve people's lives, and it's necessary to keep on, and there is an appetite there to invest in it and to develop it.
Well, I think you're seeing a number of things. So one is, even if you remember that Johns Hopkins map of the world with these blood red bubbles that kept getting bigger,
sure,
that was underpinned by a blockchain platform for secure data sharing. And then in the beginning, when PPE equipment was short, and people started having fake PPE equipment, then people fast started developing blockchain provenance so that they could ensure the provenance of PPE. So there's a whole lot of things that happened at that time. But the other thing that I think is interesting and maybe less expected was that crypto is being used in some really unexpected ways. So I was talking to a colleague of mine in the Philippines who runs a crypto remittance company, because remittances are a huge part of many developing countries' economies. And he was saying that what they'd seen, aside from more people using crypto for remittances because it's cheaper and faster and more direct.
And so just to interrupt, to people who aren't sure what you mean by remittances, people in the Philippines who may work overseas, make money and send the money home to the broader family that's still living there.
Yes, that's right. So a lot, the Philippines, I think remittances account for something like 30% of their entire economy. But the story that I loved was micro-entrepreneurs working in the villages, and so they used to make their income from selling Netflix and Spotify cards. But when the lockdown came and all of the banks and cash outlets shut, they couldn't get foreign exchange to get their Netflix and Spotify cards, so they started using crypto for micro amounts for that foreign exchange so they could continue their businesses. And there's multiple stories like that. They're really small, but they have impact on the lives of micro-entrepreneurs all around the world.
And what sort of cryptocurrencies would they be using? The mainstays like Ethereum and Bitcoin, or were there special currencies which had been created for that purpose?
Oh, well, in that case, it's Bitcoin mainly, but it is quite interesting to see some of the other projects that have been accelerating during the pandemic. So there's one called Electronium, and its idea is basically to create a cryptocurrency for the bottom billion so that people can, buy, sell, exchange. And they've got, I think, 4 million downloads of wallets, majority being in emerging economies. And they started, obviously, by giving people access to their currency by airdrops and things like that. And then they did deals with mobile phone companies so people could exchange their ETN for free mobile phone credits. And now they've further developed it by...
ETN being Ether?
No, that's their...
Oh, this is the special one that you're talking about. Yep, sorry. Yep.
And I should say token, not currency. We shouldn't call all of these things currencies.
Because these are utility tokens, aren't they?
Yeah, so, and I mean, Nigeria's busy banning cryptocurrencies, as is India, so I think that distinction between what's a token and what kind of a token and what's a currency is really important these days. But just to finish that story, so then they started something they're calling AnyTask, I think, which is similar to Upwork, but it doesn't have that large chunk that Upwork takes, which I think is about 20% of the cost. So people, you've got some skills, you can make a website, you can do some coding, you can put it on this AnyTask and people can pay you using the ETNs to do that. And this has exploded in terms of popularity because it's enabling people to earn an income that can be exchanged for things they value. And so you're seeing things like this happening. I mean, there's another project which I love and am watching with interest called Good Dollar, which is the brainchild of the owner of eToro, which is a super successful trading platform. And they're trying to do a universal basic income experiment. So if you or any of your listeners download the Good Dollar app, every day you can get good dollars for free. So they're distributing income to anyone who wants it all around the world. I've now got nearly 2,000 good dollars. I don't know what I'm going to do with them, but I'm following the experiment because I'm sure once you've got enough people on the network and they're starting a marketplace now, you're going to be able to exchange those good dollars for things of value.
So one of the things that you prefaced that story with was a bit of entrepreneurialism, but what underpins it, if I'm reading the situation correctly, is financial inclusion, because you could say that, well, these people could be trading their services using traditional fiat currencies, but that makes one massive assumption in that these people have bank accounts, they can trade in those bank accounts, or there is hard currency that's available to be exchanged for those services in a practical kind of way. We can't make that assumption in developing countries, can we?
Well, you can't. And my point that I've been making lately is unbanked is a totally outdated concept because you don't need to be banked anymore. If you've got a wallet on your phone, what do you want a bank account for? When you can send, receive, borrow and do all of the financial transactions that you can do with the bank on your phone, you don't need a bank account.
Yeah, and what that all comes down to, I guess, is just financial inclusion. So I saw some statistics the other day, and you mentioned Kenya before. Kenya is quite a strong proponent of blockchain technology, in particular cryptocurrencies. Like I think it's fair to say that it's exponentially larger than almost like the second biggest country that's adopted it. Why is that, and what's your role in Kenya? What are you doing in Kenya?
Well, I actually spoke, Kenya had a national blockchain task force to produce their blockchain roadmap, and I presented to them. And Kenya is very future forward in terms of thinking about blockchain and technologies, as are a lot of other African countries, including Rwanda and Nigeria and South Africa. But I'm working with a group in Kenya who are doing some really interesting things. So one is a platform for connecting and empowering women, which is a safe space for women to interact, where they can find mentors, where they can create a marketplace for women. I think that's really interesting, and it's, I think, been operating in 4 African countries now. I'm working with the founder of that. I'm working with another founder who, interestingly, is creating a mobile health wallet, so you can own and store all of your health data on your phone, and then you can permission other people to look at your data, which is really transformative for healthcare, because at the moment your health data is everywhere but with you.
Yeah.
It's with the Health Insurance Commission, the doctors, the hospitals, the radiography practices, but this one is you have it and then you can decide who uses it. And most importantly in Africa is around their people's genomic data, which is becoming incredibly sought after. So that's a really interesting.
Why are they so progressive? Like, why is it out of necessity? Some of that stuff doesn't sound like it's out of necessity. Like, compared to the so-called developed countries, why are they so progressive in their thinking in this space?
I think there's a number of different reasons. I think the first one is we're too complacent. We're never going to be first in innovation because we're very comfortable with our lives and we don't see the need to change. And we've got a lot of regulation and we've got a lot of legacy systems that people don't want to move on. So they don't have that. They've got huge problems. 90% of people under 30 live in emerging economies, so they're very digitally savvy and they're very, ambitious to be able to create new and innovative ways to solve problems. I think governments are much more open to it, and you don't have those legacy systems that are holding you back. So I actually think we're going to see the sort of locus of innovation moving from the West to the developing world, and we're already seeing it now. They're moving really fast. I mean, we used to call China an emerging economy. They are so far ahead of us, it's breathtaking. But if you look at the rest of the developing world, I'm convinced that we're going to see substantial innovation coming out of the developing world.
That's a really interesting insight in the way that you look at that, because I've always looked at your work in developing countries as being a bit of a, what's the word, sort of like, there's a feel-good factor about trying to help people, but it's kind of shifted into this, well, actually no, these people that I was originally trying to help, they're actually ahead of the curve, and they don't, in fact, I need to work with them because I believe you believe strongly in this area, and they're the ones that are actually going to deliver themselves from this. They don't need the Western countries and the Asia Development Bank and the UN to give them massive funding and consultants to try and get them out of their worries, but they'll probably do it themselves. Is that a fair statement, do you think? Especially, at least in terms of the technology.
Oh, I think so, and I think that's sustainable change. I think a lot of the things that we, in the royal sense, have done, since the Second World War has not been sustainable. And I think if you go back and have a look at what the legacy of sustainable change is, it's a bit disappointing. But I still think we have, and that's why I work with these startups and different groups, is they still need help, they still need know-how, they know what they're trying to do. Often they need connections with the outside world because they can build something in Kenya or in India, but they can't get traction anywhere outside of those countries. So connecting them up to global networks is really important. And the last, I don't know if it's the last thing because you haven't shown any signs of wanting to stop, but one thing I did really want to talk about, because I think it's so powerful, that I've been working on lately, is voice and the future of voice as a medium, particularly for connecting with the bottom billion, because they're not literate. They can have a mobile phone, but they can't do SMS text messaging. But people are now inventing really cheap, low-cost devices where you can do podcasts or you can speak to people and use images so that they can connect, they can learn how to get a wallet, they can learn how to run their business. And a friend of mine has raised, she's got $150,000 from the Islamic Development Bank to develop this kind of voice connection for women in Islamic countries to be able to connect and lift them up. And I think we're going to see a lot of that, and it's going to be hugely powerful. But we're even seeing that ourselves. I don't know if you're on Clubhouse yet.
No, not yet. And this podcast won't be. I'm a bit scared of it just disappearing into the ether. Maybe I need to get on board a bit more though.
I think you've got to get onto Clubhouse. I think I think it's a transitional step. But what's interesting about Clubhouse to me is it's immediate. It's voice, so it means I can get on my phone now and there could be 100 rooms in Clubhouse where people are hosting discussions on a whole variety of topics. I scroll down and I go, artificial intelligence in healthcare, yeah, I'm really interested in that. I just go and sit in the room, so my icon appears that I'm there. There's an interesting panel, I can look them up and see their backgrounds. And then if I want to engage in the conversation or ask a question, I just put my hand up, because this is all about engagement, which is the opposite of a webinar, which is all about you dispensing your opinion to anyone who's listening, but they don't really get to engage on the questions that they've got. So Clubhouse is super interactive, and if you want, you can stay in that room as long as you like, or you can just ask your question, leave quietly and go to another room. There's nothing preventing you from dropping in and out of rooms and listening to anyone you want.
You'll have to send me an invite. And I saw the other day that the autocratic sort of governments are not too happy with it, because it's been a platform for people to be able to express their dissent about the government. And because there's no permanent record of it, it becomes quite hard for them to trace and then prosecute. Not that sort of evidence has been something that has prevented them from bringing nonsensical charges against people. So do you get the same fulfillment out of what you're doing today as you have previously, especially being landlocked in Australia?
No. No, because, I think a few things. Basically, that wonderful events company folded, so, really, I went broke. We all lost our jobs, so that's not really great. And then kind of trying to recreate something which has meaning and you can still be connected and do it, it's hard.
Yeah.
But I just think what you learn, I think, about hardship is that you get through it, you endure it, you make the best of it, and then you come out the other end, and, I totally know that. And so a lot of these things that I'm doing, it does matter. When I talk to, Irene in Africa and she tells me what she's doing with her platform, or people that I'm speaking to all around the world, and you're helping and encouraging them to do what they're doing in a real sense. It has real meaning, and so, that has power. And I like that. And also, I'm writing another book now. This is what you do when you're really bored and locked down in a pandemic, is you start writing books. So I'm writing...
My dad's written 4.
Oh, this is it. So the next one is applied ethics in a digital age. But it's such an important topic that is only emerging, so it's great to just be able to sort of bring together a bunch of people who are working on different aspects of ethics and digital and put it together in a place where people can come and look. So yeah, this is not the fun life I had in mind. The life I had before was much better, but it's pretty good and I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I think I need to introduce you to my dad. You may have met him, but just your stories and where you're at, it's very similar. And the way that you're both sort of dealing with the situation is in a similar way. Like dad won't let it beat him down, but I can tell it's affecting him because he thrives on being in a village in Papua New Guinea, talking to people about how they can market their cocoa and how they can actually increase their financial well-being from a primary product that they already have, but they're just not exploiting it correctly. Okay, pause, change tack, because we're coming to the end. It would be remiss of me not to ask you one question. Talk to me, Tesla, $1.5 billion in cryptocurrency purchases, Bitcoin up at $47,000. Is it a flash in the pan? Like, what's Jane Thomason's view on all of that?
No, it's not a flash in the pan in my view. What I think it is after a bit over 10 years worth of Bitcoin continuously proving people to be wrong, and the pandemic, because during the pandemic no one knew where to put their money as a safe haven. And so institutional investors have now recognised that Bitcoin's got a limited number of Bitcoins in the world that can't increase, so it's not like government's printing more money. You can't make more Bitcoin than exists, so it's scarce. It's held its value, and it's volatile, but if you look at the curve, it's continued to go up, and I think it will continue to go up. People are predicting 100,000 by the end of the year. People who are more ambitious are predicting 300,000. And actually Ethereum's gone up more than Bitcoin for those people who don't know that. So those two, in my view, are going to continue to go up, and they're a pretty solid investment right now.
Yeah, I own one Ethereum. I paid $400 for it. I saw it go down to $90. I kind of wrote it off, and just to sort of see it up at $1,800, it's quite mind-boggling in a way. But yeah, and what about Tesla's decision? Why do you think Tesla's put a big stake in the sand and said we're going to acquire such massive stakes of crypto?
Well, I suspect Elon Musk already had a lot anyway. He just didn't say, and I think in doing it, it's a bloody good investment. If they're going to put the money somewhere, you may as well put it there because it's likely to be continuing to increase.
Yeah, well, they've been right about a few things, including that you don't need to be an incumbent motor vehicle company to be a successful motor vehicle company, which is now worth more than all the other combustion engine motor vehicle companies, I think, put together. So they've definitely...
I think what Elon Musk teaches us, and I think this is what we have to learn for the future, is the future is going to be vastly different than the past. And if we use our sort of traditional ways that we've been educated and taught that things happen to think about the future, we're going to get it so wrong. And so I think that's where we have to open our minds to almost unimaginable possibilities, because that's what technology is already creating, but most people just don't know it yet.
You know what, that's what I think I love about you the most, is that you have the most open mind. You embrace technology, but at its core you want to help people, and I'm kind of jealous. On that lovely note, how do people find you? Because I could sit here and talk forever, and I know that sounds like one of those cliche things that people would say, but if someone wants to find you because something on this interview has piqued their interest, is there a way that people can reach out to you on a particular social media platform? Or
just message me on LinkedIn. I'm
Dr. Jane Thomason.
Yep, I'm very active on LinkedIn. Send me a direct message and I'll reply to you.
Same for me, Brad Vinning at LinkedIn. No cryptic names there. Jane Thomason, thank you very much. I'm going to come over there and give you a big hug after this in a COVID-safe manner.
Thanks very much, Brad. It's a pleasure.